Welcome back to Book Club. As you can see, Audie is here with me today. He's been off snoozing for my videos recently, but today he had an upsetting experience. I let him go out for his little afternoon walkabout, and I told him to be back at 1:30, and he came back at 1:30, and I was outside. So he had to come over and scream at me to let me know I was supposed to be inside and that the least I could do was pick him up and carry him in, which I did. But yes, it was alarming. We're inside now. Life is good. Yes, it's very good. Well, today we are taking Catherine Morland, because this is our second third of Northanger Abbey. We're taking Catherine Morland through the end of her stay at Bath and right into Northanger Abbey, which is where the third of the book begins. So, when we come back. Well, in the second third of the book, we start to see Catherine Morland, who has begun as a sheltered, naive 17-year-old who's never been outside her tiny little village in the shadow of Stonehenge. She's starting to come into her own. We start to see who Catherine, the woman, is going to be. And in the second third, we see her starting to wise up to the Thorpes, John Thorpe in particular, not so much Isabella, not yet. And we see her standing up to her brother when the Thorpes are attempting to get her to break her engagement to go for a walk with the Tilneys. And Catherine puts her foot down, says no, even when her brother is pressuring her. The answer is still no. So at this point, we are seeing Catherine, the heroine, because we're seeing her, well, stand up to her brother. She's going to do what she thinks is right, no matter how much pressure is brought to bear on her, which is certainly a real test of her heroic character. She is through with Bath. She's going to Northanger, and we have the sense of anticipation that Catherine is feeling as she's about to go off into what is really a dream come true for her. It's the man she has a crush on, and he lives in an abbey, a beautiful old Gothic building somewhere, and Catherine has already constructed elaborate fantasies about this based on the Gothic literature that she's been reading. Now, when I say Gothic, I am not talking about Gothic in the real sense, in the medieval sense. This is a genre of literature that, it's characterized by innocent, fragile, highly virtuous heroines and gallant heroes and rapscallions out to take advantage of the unwary, usually set in gloomy old buildings, etc., etc. There was a formula to these books. And in fact, someone actually did some research on this in the second half of the 18th century, which would have been, 1750 to 1800. And this would have constituted Jane Austen's reading material. There were no less than 34 Gothic novels with the word Abbey in the title. So this is where we start to see the parody elements come into play. And again, as I say, we're seeing Catherine coming into her own. She's starting to become more of a human being and less of a timid little girl. So let's take a look at some of the stuff we've encountered in the second third. And let's start with Blaise Castle. Blaise Castle was not a real castle, no matter what John Thorpe said. It was a folly. It was built in 1766, and almost from the beginning, it was open to the public. Tourists, they'd charge a fee. You'd go in, you'd look around, and but when I say it was a folly, it was a small outbuilding. So let me show you pictures. The first picture is the outside of Blaise Castle, and the second picture is from the inside. The reason the second picture is so important is, please note, when you see the first picture, note that Gothic window on the second story in the front, because you're going to see that from the inside, and it's going to give you a sense of the scale of the building. So here you go. Not very impressive. About the size of a three-story house. I'm trying to think of what we have. Having grown up in New England, I was surrounded by houses probably much bigger than this. Say a three-story country farmhouse. No. Now, interestingly enough, and this is an aside, but throwing it out there anyway, the Wikipedia entry for Blaise Castle has changed several times over the years. I can remember a time when the entry included a statement from Jane Austen. Jane Austen described it as the finest place in England, worth going 50 miles out of your way to see at any time. Really? Extremely misleading, and certainly suggests that Jane Austen took this seriously as Castle, which she most certainly did not. This is when you look at the contributor to that Wikipedia entry and say, well, here's someone without a sense of humor at all who does not understand the concept of irony. And people had written in and said, wait, you don't understand. This is sarcastic. She doesn't mean this. And in that sense, it's a lot like J.K. Rowling probably said in one of the 7 Harry Potter books in there, right behind me, right there, one of these days we'll look it up and find out, probably said, magic is real. If you say in a vacuum that J.K. Rowling said magic is real, that certainly suggests that she is, a gullible and superstitious person, which clearly she is not. I'm sure one of the books says that, or at least words to that effect. So, lesson to be taken from this is, if it's in Wikipedia, take it with a grain of salt, because clearly that is the sort of irresponsible entry that never would have passed muster if it were being presented in a real encyclopedia and having to withstand the review of a scholarly committee. So, Blaise Castle, joke going in, and it was a joke that Jane Austen's readers would have gotten, because the castle, being just over 50 years old at the time of publication of Northanger Abbey, would have been well known to everyone. It was something of a local landmark, not because it was the old. That's the other thing Thorpe says, oldest places in England, corridors by the miles, up staircases. Oh, please. So far from reality. When Catherine when Catherine takes her walk with Henry and Eleanor, Henry starts chiding her for her choices of words, for her use of popular words that he considers to be misused. Clearly, this is Austen taking issue with words that are frequently abused in their slang forms. Isn't it the nicest book? Well, as Tilney points out, isn't that a great word? You can use it to describe everything. Two nice young women were having a nice walk. And nice, in fact, means precise, neat. A person who was nicely dressed was properly dressed. They had a neat appearance. It was used to describe fine distinctions. That is a nice distinction, being precise and a little on the persnickety side. So nice was starting to fall into our current definition, but hadn't quite gotten there yet. Amazingly was another word that he pulls out that he doesn't like. It suggests amazement. And this is another example of word change. In the 18th century, when Austen was a young girl, amazing meant to amaze, to astonish, to astound. And it was later diluted and was beginning to mean just very. And we see that, and most of us have been around long enough to have seen that with the word awesome. Remember in the 80s and 90s, that was the word on the mouth of every kid. That is so awesome. Well, awesome is awe-inspiring. That is like amazing. And awesome eventually just came to mean, isn't that interesting? Isn't that cool? The meaning had gotten diluted. So we are seeing that ourselves. And I can totally sympathize with Austen, because I think I've mentioned that decimate is one of the words that always just grates on me, because people will use decimate to mean destroyed completely, decimated, left not a trace alive, when in fact it actually means, as we know from the root deci, it meant to destroy a tenth, which is what the Roman officers would do when they would become angry with their troops. They'd kill every 10th man, which just goes to show you that complaining about being confined to your barracks or having to peel potatoes in the kitchen in today's army is nothing to be all upset about. Life could be a lot worse, and at times it was. In that same conversation, Johnson and Blair are mentioned, and I thought I would just quickly say that Dr. Hugh Blair, who was a rhetorician, and Samuel Johnson was a lexicographer. So these are people who made their careers on not just the definition of words in Johnson's case, but the proper use of words in Dr. Blair's case. When Catherine is through with her walk with the Tilneys, she has an opportunity to discuss the trip with one of Isabella's younger sisters. I don't remember if it was Anna Maria, and finds out that it was just, it was a wonderful trip. It was just the best ever, and so on. The Thorpe family tendency to exaggerate. And At one point, she is told that they stopped to give a few shillings in purses and spars. Now, that is a really confusing sentence because we don't have a frame of reference. So, purses means exactly what we would take it to mean, small change purses, which were common souvenirs to be purchased. So they went off, they bought some souvenirs. The purses were some of the souvenirs they bought. And as I say, that was a common thing to buy at a tourist trap. Spars were little carved crystal figurines that just happened to be a common tourist souvenir. They were in the area of Avon, and in that area they had like little crystalline rock formations they were quarrying, and they would carve them into little trinkets. So gave a few shillings in purses and spars means they spent some pocket change getting some of the typical souvenirs that were bought at the time. Now, of course, we have no way of knowing this. For starters, we don't use the word spar in that way, and we don't buy purses as souvenirs. To us, purses are, we tend to think of handbags when we think of purses. So, all that it meant, but I thought I would give you that one. When Catherine is discussing Isabella's flirtation with Frederick Tilney, with Henry's brother, Henry tells her she is a close questioner. That's an interesting expression. It's not common these days. It used to be. And this is one of those that if we think about it, it starts to make sense. A close questioner is someone who is asking some very specific, very pointed questions that are aimed at digging out information, even if the other person doesn't want to give it to them. So that's what this means. A close questioner is someone who is inquiring closely into a matter. Another expression that comes up when they are having this discussion is that the mess will drink Isabella Thorpe. Now, that's a little more involved. Frederick is an army officer, and young army officers, the young ones especially, would be assigned to a mess. That would be a small group, and mess, the mess part comes from the fact that they would eat together. They would have usually their own kitchen. These were people who very often had means, economic means, so they would provision the kitchen themselves. So the mess would drink Isabella Thorpe basically meant that Frederick's partners in crime, his fellow soldiers, who would have been other captains, lieutenants, etc., other young officers, would have toasted Isabella. They would have just said, "Here's to Isabella Thorpe," and that would have been the end of it. And that was what Henry was trying to express. What will be the end of it will be that, the mess will drink Isabella Thorpe for a fortnight, and it'll be all over and done with. Then we leave Bath, and we leave Bath in a curricle. So, then we leave Bath, and as Catherine is leaving Bath, at this point, and I go into my phone because I started taking some of these notes on the fly. So, when they are leaving Bath, she gets into General Tilney's carriage, and her own writing desk is in danger of being thrown away. Well, this is not a desk as we would think of it. It's not a large piece of furniture. It's a small laptop affair, often with a padded and upholstered underside so it could sit in one's lap, and it was a portable writing surface. So, and I just hope you didn't have images of Catherine trying to haul a giant desk along with them. Later in the trip, she goes into Henry's curricle. So let's take a look at a curricle. It's a small light carriage, usually pulled by a pair of horses, sometimes a single horse. In this case, it was a pair of horses because Austen refers to the light horses of the curricle, plural. The whole notion of young women riding around in open carriages with men who they are not even related to, which seemed to annoy Mr. Allen incredibly. It was not done. A respectable young woman would not get into a vehicle with a young man and go riding off somewhere. That there was an appearance of impropriety there that would suggest all kinds of negative things to anybody witnessing it. So that's where this comes from. And then later, as they're heading toward the Abbey, they have a 2 hours and a half stay at an inn, a tavern, where they are baiting the horses and where they eat without being hungry, etc. That is an interesting expression, and you find this frequently in Austen's work and other works from this period. They would not have said 2.5 hours or 2.5 years or something. It would have been 2 years and a half, 2 hours and a half. Just one of the turns of phrase that in our day has just come down as something very different. There are a couple of these, and I've made notes so that I can draw your attention to it. All right, we also have a woman is fine for her own satisfaction alone. And in that sense, fine simply means well-dressed, elegantly dressed, because they're using fine in terms of superior, as in fine china. I seem to be backtracking a little here. So please bear with me. It's all in those 10 chapters somewhere, but it looks like I'm taking it out of order. I don't think my notebook and my phone notes are matching up properly in terms of a chronological order. Thorpe asks if Henry Tilney drives a phaeton with bright chestnuts. Kind of bizarre. A phaeton is a Greek demigod, and bright chestnuts are nuts. What he means is a type of open carriage. It's a small open carriage, and bright chestnuts refer to the chestnut-colored horses. He also, Austen says that they had entered Argyle buildings. All right, this is just a Britishism. We say we live on Main Street. They say they live in Main Street. I'm not sure if they have Main Street in England the way we have it here. Every town has at least one Main Street. High Street. They have a high street in every town. They live in it, not on it. So when they are entering Edgar's buildings, they're not driving their horses through the buildings. They are passing the buildings on the road. Again, just Britishism. Catherine goes to the pump room to find the Tilneys' address. Now, the reason she does that is because, as I mentioned before, when you paid your subscription fees at Bath, you were registered, your name was inscribed in the pump room book. And that would have said who the family was, where they were staying, all this information that to our minds today is just reckless to throw that sort of stuff out there. But for them, it was, their version of a 1950s phone book, at least in Bath, because it did give you a list of the people who were there, where they were staying, and apparently nobody thought this was invasive or dangerous. Very different world they lived in. When Isabella speaks to Catherine about her brother John having proposed to Catherine, which of course he didn't, but apparently in his own mind he did, she says, "He could not have received my last." Well, my last would have been my most recent letter. Because if he had, he would have understood that Isabella was not going to be marrying into a vast fortune, and that would have changed John's plans. So that was lost on Catherine, but it was not meant to be thrown away on us as the readers. We were supposed to catch that, and catch that well. Isabella clearly is a fortune hunter, and this is stating it outright, that if John had known what Catherine's real economic situation was, he never would have pursued his sort of fanciful notion that he had proposed to her. The trunks were carrying down. This is an expression that Austen uses when she describes the process of getting the trunks onto the carriage to head to Northanger. The trunks were carrying down. In Persuasion, that was the other book that was published at the same time, there's an expression in there about children looking to see if something good was giving away. Not at all how we would phrase the same thing. We would say the trunks were being carried down, or is something good being given away. That is interesting. This is one of the things I love about Austen, by the way. It shows you what a word nerd I am, that I love the difference of phrasing. The trunks were carrying down. It makes it appear that the trunks are the motivating force in this sentence. Same thing with something good is giving away. It makes it seem like the little sweet treats the kids are looking for are entirely responsible for the process of someone giving them away. Just interesting turns of phrase, something that I appreciate, and I hope you do too. Well, we had the curricle. The Chaise 4, which was the larger carriage, the one that the general liked to travel in, was a massive coach. It would have been pulled by 4 horses, and the postilions, and apparently there's more than one of them. Traditionally, there would have been 1 postilion on 4 horses, but I guess the general has many more postilions than the average person. This is a servant who would have been riding the lead horse, and there's like this whole thing about which horse he would ride, and he would direct the horses. You would not need someone to sit on the coach and drive the horses if you had a postilion there, because he would, in effect, be driving the horses, directing the horses from his position on the front left horse. That was standard. But if there were postilions, who knows how many they had and what horses they were on. But it's intended to give you some sense of how extravagantly and elegantly they were traveling, with horses and servants on the horses and whatever else have you. Another one of the interesting expressions is when Catherine is in the curricle being driven by Henry, and Austen says that being driven by him next to being dancing with him was, wonderful. That's another very odd turn of phrase. Being driven by him makes sense to us, but being dancing with him, the being seems superfluous to us. But again, interesting turn of phrase, just early 19th century English. And Henry then tells Catherine, he spins a tale for her about what she's going to find there, and she'll find this old cabinet, and the servant is going to whisper to her that there's a church but 2 miles off, and there's an underground passage that connects the two, and how could she resist such an adventure? 2 miles. Now, I'm a good walker. 2 miles is about 40 minutes for me. I walk about 1 mile in 20 minutes, roughly. Yeah, that's just about it. So it would be a 40-minute walk out to the church and a 40-minute walk back. So we see the extent to which Austen is having fun with us, that this little, how could you resist such a quick and easy adventure of crawling through a tunnel for 40 minutes, 2 miles, in 40 minutes back. And you go into one room and you see nothing but a hoard of diamonds or the remains of an instrument of torture. She is mocking the daylights out of these Gothic romances. She really is. And this is what we as her readers are intended to take away. We are intended to look at this vast body of literature that Austen was swimming in and say, yeah, it's pretty freaking ridiculous. There's nothing even vaguely credible about any of it. And it's in the realm of pure fantasy. Now, let's see what we have here. No, this stops it. So, what we need to take from this whole tale of Henry's is that people are just very, very excessive in their gullibility when they start buying into these Gothic romances. And in particular, we are to understand that this is what formed Catherine's view of the world around her. She has Fullerton, which is the real world, her little village, and her parents and her family, and they 40 surrounding families, Austen says in the first chapter. So Fullerton is a very small place, 40 surrounding families. And this is not just the 40 families that they visit with. It's 40 families, period, because she's talking about, an unknown child left on a random doorstep. Oh, and keep in mind, in Gothic romance, the child was ordinarily left on the doorstep of a shepherd or a farmer. So we're not talking about just 40 families of the gentry. We're talking about 40 families, period. That's been her universe. the outer world that she believes she is in is peopled by the characters of her Gothic novels. That's her expectation of the world outside Fullerton. So this is where we see Catherine's worldview being set up. And of course, in our the final third of the book, we're going to see that taken down. Let's just do our final book club giveaway. This, not sure how well you can see it, but I'm sure you can see the cat. Photobomb Kitty Audie, a neighborhood legend, coming to a YouTube channel near you. This is the Audie magnet. This was the one I told you I'm saving the best for last. Suzanne Urban, and I believe I've given you a link to her shop. If I haven't, I will put it in this. This is a magnet that she actually custom made for us. So this was the third. Let me know, because this is giveaway just as the two previous were. And next week, next book club, when we finish up Northanger Abbey, I'm going to announce all three giveaways. I've got the other two here. And this one, this is so sweet. Photobomb Kitty Audie, a neighborhood legend. Well, he is. Audie has been amusing himself by going into the neighbors' houses this week. He has come back covered in cobwebs and whatever. My foolish neighbors leave their doors or windows open when Audie is loose. What are they thinking? And, you know, of course, I'm running around knocking on doors. I'm so sorry my cat was in your house. And, you know, what can I say? Fortunately, they like him because he does an excellent job of keeping vermin out of the neighborhood. This is his neighborhood, and he protects it well. So we don't have problems around here with skunks smelling the place up or moles digging up people's gardens, because that's Audie's job. All right, so this week we are finishing up Northanger Abbey. We're doing our final third. Give some thought to what you would like to hit next. We do have, let me just see right here. We have this, A Confederacy of Dunces. This is probably, as I mentioned before, it's very, very funny. It's probably one of the best books you never heard of before. It won a Pulitzer Prize. It's, I don't know what to say. The book is great, but you would be surprised how many people never heard of it. We also have some other choices for those of you who like classic literature. I say this with a catch in my throat. We can do Middlemarch if you like. People who are apparently sane and intelligent claim that it is the finest novel in the English language. And it is, the fact is, look at a list of finest novels in the English language, and you will invariably see Middlemarch at the top of that list. As I say, sane, intelligent people have made this choice, and if you haven't guessed already, it's a choice I do not understand at all. To me, this is like having grabbed a Bazooka Joe comic out of a wad of chewing gum and said, here, look, this is the finest novel in the English language. I hate Middlemarch. Ugh. But I can be objective about it. So if you want the finest novel in the English language, we'll do Middlemarch. We could also have some fun with this. This was written in the 1960s and set in the 1960s, so this is not an historical book. If you like the historical books, we can do them. If you like Austen, where are we here? Persuasion might be a good choice after Northanger Abbey because there are some parallel themes in the books. But your choice, we've got this. Middlemarch is over there in that section of the bookcase, which is the one that's the door I open least. I do dust it occasionally. We got Middlemarch, and I am totally open to anything else you might be interested in. In fact, I'd love it if we could find something new and exciting. So, what we would be looking for is we cannot have anything that has too much in the way of sex or violence. That's the only caveats I'm going to throw on this, because we have a group of people who all have different tolerances for these things. So we're going to keep this reasonably family friendly. That basically means Game of Thrones is out. What is it? No, Songs of Fire and Ice. That's the one Game of Thrones was based on. Way too much violence, way too graphic, and boy, they nail you immediately with that stuff. Takes them a while to get into the sex, but yeah, pretty graphic too. Those are off the table. We're going to keep this family friendly, within reason. I mean, we're all adults. It's not like we're going to be reading children's books, or we're going to be reading books written in the 19th century forever. So give it some thought, throw your ideas out there, enter the giveaways, because next week I expect all 3 of these beautiful magnets to go out into the mail to somebody. All right, have a great day, and I'll catch you all next time.